Hi, I'm Leslie Bailey. I am the co-founder and CEO of Indy Maven, and I'm here today with Ashley Butler, the founder of MySherri. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks for coming. So first off, can you just tell us what MySherri is, what you do?
Sure. So MySherri is a fractional in-home management services company, and I tell everyone that's really big fancy language for we send in another adult to be a set of helping hands in areas that are really difficult to find. So think about, the meal prep and helping with laundry, personal assistance, getting ready for Christmas, that type of thing.
I do know. I know firsthand because I use MySherri personally in my house, and I just wanted to share with you a little bit. So I'm a very open and transparent person, as I know you are too, and we'll link to some of the things that some conversations we've had in the past, and some things that you've done and shared your story. I won't get so much into that today, but I wanted to share the anecdote. I think twice this year, I started to say came very close to burnout, but now I'm wondering if maybe I just did burn out. I don't know where the line is of I'm about to, and I'm there, I've crossed it.
Yeah.
And I realized that my schedule no longer felt like my own. We had a lot of things on our family where I've got 2 little kids plus 13-year-old stepson, and so anytime in our house there's 2 to 3 children to take care of, and I have this partner, and my mother-in-law lived with us, and she was ill, and in fact I just got a call, she's in the hospital right now. So it's just life, right? These things. I had to put both my cats down this year. I mean, this for our household was certainly a challenging year, and I know it has been, especially for many women in what we do. We hear this. So I wanted to say thank you, because having that extra set of hands in our house this year, I just don't know, it made me feel like I could at least sort of keep up in my house, as opposed to, at least I knew at a minimum, there was going to be food and clean sheets, and I was going to be able to find clothes to put my kids in the morning.
Right.
And so can you speak to a little bit, like, what are you seeing with your clients and these circumstances? Because women specifically are really kind of refiguring things out this year. Mm-hmm. So can you speak to what you've seen as far as like your business goes, and how you've been able to affect these lives of other families as well?
It is, I think it's this feeling of sort of always going and wondering where you're actually reaching, where are you actually getting to? And when I speak with prospective clients, it's profoundly moving for me, because I hear the I don't know what else to do. You know
desperation.
What I mean? It is.
Frankly,
it's like a sigh of desperation. Yeah. And sometimes, we cry together, sometimes we laugh together, and sometimes it's just saying it's okay to feel this way, because I think that there's this component for a lot of women that I speak with, like they feel like they're failing to even feel like they're failing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we're seeing a lot of women come into service in terms of, they're like, we're drowning literally in laundry.
Yeah.
We're drowning in laundry, and it would be amazing if we could eat dinner together as a family, and just to be able to kind of lighten this like burden that I think that women are able to share. And I talk to women about, it's like this to-do list kind of following you around the home, just everywhere you look, you're like, oh, that should be done, and that should be done, and that should be done. And when you start to kind of trim that back and you offload it to someone else, what does that feel like? So I hear the before, which is sort of this sigh of desperation, and then I get to check in with them later, and they're like, this has been a complete game changer. I mean, so the burnout piece is real.
Excuse me.
It's real, and I think that it's something that we have to be willing to acknowledge. And then being able to ask for help is the first step, but I found the really hard step for a lot of women is the receiving of help.
Why do you think that is? And what does that look like in your case?
Yeah.
Like not wanting to let tasks go?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a delegation thing, and I think that now this is pure speculation based on, just the women that I'm able to interact with, but I think there's a lot of fear of letting go for a couple of reasons. One, they've tried in the past, either with significant others or in-laws or children, and they felt in some way, shape, or form let down. And so they're concerned about delegating again. And then I think that there's this worth component that we've been sort of conditioned to believe that we should be these high achieving women, right, with the careers. Hey, but don't forget about all of the stuff that has to happen at home. I was talking with a client recently who's going to be coming onto service, and she said, never once has my husband been asked what's for dinner. And so, it's sort of ingrained within us, right? And then somehow everyone else is attuned to the same story that society's sharing with us, and then we're internalizing. And so that internalization and that narrative, I think that women sort of perpetually tell themselves is why there's a difference. It's almost like they're able to ask for help, but once the help actually arrives, they're not really sure what to do with it.
Yeah. First challenge is identifying that you need help, right? But then we have the second challenge, which is then receiving it and knowing what to do with it. Have you found there are things that women can do, or what's your advice to help make that second step a little easier?
So I think it's a lot of internal work, to be honest, right?
But you should come with a therapist.
Yeah, well, sometimes I'm like, are we bridging again?
Your Sherri comes and then the therapist.
But I think that the best piece of advice that I can offer, and one that I had to learn, not only as a client, but also even in the midst of, it's interesting, I brought in this help in my home, and then I've been sort of struggling to delegate within my own business. And the best piece of advice that I can offer is that don't let this concept, I guess, of perfection sort of stand in the way of good enough, right? Are you getting help? Are the towels being put away? Maybe they're not put away exactly the way that you would have folded them and lined them up, but you've gotten the time back, and that time is so incredibly valuable, right? So the piece of advice that I would give is, it's okay to let go of some of those things. You get to prioritize. Where is your time most valuably spent? And then how is that help going to sort of come in and take those things off of your plate? And I think it's probably easier said than done. I work on it every single day, but it's a work in progress, and we are a relationship service, right? So, relationships take time.
Yeah.
And it takes communication.
Well, I'm sort of smiling because I'm also thinking about the benefit of, I just ordered this book, I think it's called Radical Candor.
Is that by Cy Wakeman?
Yeah, right? And so I haven't read it, so you could probably speak to it. But the benefit too of then saying, it's also okay to say, and I'd like something done differently too.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that is also a challenge. When you have someone come into your house and like, oh, they did it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's someone coming to your house or whether it's, a family member doing something for you, whether it's an employee, I think women have a hard time sometimes giving feedback, right? Or constructive criticism, or asking things to be done differently too.
Absolutely. And that's I love that you brought that up, because, the way that we're structured at MySherri is you've got sort of a whole team. If for whatever reason you don't feel that you can share the feedback, you have someone else on our team to go to. But this sort of hospitality mentality where it's like, well, darn, I'd really love for it to be done this way, but not understanding or knowing really how you can share that feedback, because I think it comes to sort of some of these things that we're taught really early on, which is that, it's not nice to say, actually, I'd be much happier if it were done this way, right?
And in reality, you're doing the other person a favor oftentimes too.
Absolutely.
Right? By being transparent and not letting resentment build. Now this is
Yes.
beyond the home, right? This
Yeah.
is in it, and it can be a new romantic relationship.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, MySherri and therapy.
Yeah.
I think that, the idea, but you get to practice, right? It's practice, and it takes practice. It's not going, if it doesn't feel comfortable to you immediately, to provide that feedback, then you have to work yourself into it. And I think that one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was to ask questions. I think that you can get to where it is that you're going in terms of being able to provide feedback. But the first question, when I say ask questions, Leslie, do you mind? I have something really important I'd love to share with you. Are you open?
Like leading with the question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because you're opening a door, right? You're asking for permission to come in, essentially,
Right.
as opposed to, Leslie, I've got some feedback I'd like to share.
Right.
And you're like, oh,
yeah, that feels very different.
What is happening, And I mean, it's worked with my significant other. It's worked with my home coordinator. Do you have some time for me to share some feedback? Absolutely. And then, lead with heart first, which is to say, I'm so appreciative of the help that you are providing me, the time that you're trying to provide me back. And here's a way I think we can really level up in partnership together, right? There's a way to do it, I think, in which you're providing really critical feedback, and I don't mean critical in terms of critique necessarily, but critical in terms of the function, and being able to do so in partnership with that person, as opposed to feeling like, oh man, they're going to hate me at the end of this.
So those things really can apply to what we were originally talking about, of the women having this challenge of taking care of themselves. I mean, even that is an act of self-care. And I've talked in the past about boundaries, not bubble baths, and that we have this now what has become a semi-toxic culture of self-care, because we're not really talking about what it is and what it isn't, right? Outside of the, you need this face mask and you need time for a massage. And number one, also luxuries. And that really isn't what solves it. These are Band-Aids. So what are some other things like that, an example, that you think that women can do, kind of some takeaways that you've seen to implement that really are a way to put themselves first? Now, that doesn't mean you're not caring for other people. It's the oxygen mask thing, right? So,
Absolutely.
So what are some ways that you've seen or recommendations you have for women to kind of say, I need to take care of me first, and then we can take care of everybody else?
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that I've seen, because a lot of us sort of live and die by our calendars, and it's blocking out time. Just block the time.
Just time.
Just block the time, and it doesn't have to be a bubble bath, and it doesn't have to be a massage, and it doesn't have to be these things, but be okay with just being, and block that time. And it feels exceptionally weird initially.
From a friend?
As if I've been there, maybe just recently, like this morning.
So why is that weird? Why does that feel weird?
I think that, at least for me, I don't feel like I am worthwhile if I'm not doing. And I struggle. I mean, you know this, Leslie. We're building this entire community to get women to separate this concept of work and worth. And, they say those who can't do teach. But I am actively working on that for myself, right? Because simply being, it refills my cup, right? But I have to separate those two things, and I have to sort of get out of my own head. And that time doesn't cost me anything. And in fact, the return on the investment for that time it's significant, because I actually have energy then to pour into everyone else's cup. And for me, it's not the massage and it's not the facial. In fact, those things are like, oh gosh, I have to be where, when, and so there's that piece. And I think it's blocking time and then respecting your own time, right? And again, so I hired an assistant who actually helps protect me from myself.
Yeah.
Because I had a tendency, and I think that a lot of women potentially could relate to this, there's this tendency, we block time for ourselves and then we fill it in with everybody else's needs, right? And so my time is actually protected now for me. And I'm significantly more comfortable with protecting it for myself, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't stand up for you and your time and your worth, no one else is going to. The world is pulling at you from all of these different directions, and everyone's going to ask more and more and more. And if you aren't willing to put up the boundary to say, this is for me, and this is the most selfless thing I can do to be more present for you, then that's what I'm going to do, right? You're absolutely right. If you're not putting your oxygen mask on first, how are you supposed to help anyone else?